in Trinity College. He's a chartered building surveyor and a registered building surveyor, and I'd like to thank Eoin for coming today. And he's going to give his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Richard and the B.Sc MSO for inviting the department to participate in the CPD day on Part B of the second schedule to the Building Regulations and to Technical Guidance Document B. As Richard said, my role with the Department of Housing and the Building Standards Advisory Unit is to provide technical advice to examine issues in respect of the built environment, particularly fire safety, accessibility, stairways, ladders, ramps and guards. And for the last 4 years, as part of the ongoing development or redevelopment of the technical guidance document, we've been knee-deep in the mire of fire safety in terms of the fundamental review of technical guidance document B, which is presented through the amendments to the building regulations and to the technical provisions. Just as a brief overview, for the next 40 or so minutes this morning, I'll bring it through a high-level overview of the building regulations amendments themselves, some of the technical provisions of the Technical Guidance Document B, Fire Safety Volume 1, Buildings Other than Dwelling Houses, which is designed as a partner document to Volume 2, the Dwelling House Provisions, to pause on the transitional arrangements that have been provided through the statutory instrument, giving effect to the changes to the building regulations and the effect to the technical guidance document, and to look a little bit towards the future in terms of the complementary initiatives that were born out of the review of the technical guidance document and the building regulations, and how we will progress into the future in terms of examination of the ongoing issue of fire safety in the built environment. Just to pause in the terms of the title of the slide overview, to give a bit of context, and the previous speaker did mention the scope of the review and the length and breadth of examination. This document, as I said, it kicked off many, many years ago in terms of the evolution of the technical guidance document on a recommendation from the Building Regulations Advisory Body. The document this in terms of building regulations examined. The document itself has grown in size from 180 to nearly 380 pages. The number of diagrams has nearly tripled. The number of tables has nearly doubled. There are 8 principal sections and appendices, dozens of subsections, and hundreds of provisions within it. So to say it's an overview is paying a little bit of a disproportionate service to it. There's a lot in it. We welcome and recommend everyone to read the document in its entirety, as it's designed to be read and applied, but we'll give a flavour of the document this morning. To start with, in terms of the building regulations, there have been a number of consequential amendments to the building regulations, giving effect or in parallel to the development of the technical guidance document. Article 5 governs, amongst other provisions, the definitions of our buildings, definitions of provisions that are applied throughout the entirety of the building regulatory system. As part of this review, we did take a good long look at not only the building uses, but the terms and their applicability in the modern built environment. And for that reason, bearing in mind these regulations were originally written in 1991, a lot of change in terms of societal practice and norms and our appreciation for an inclusive environment. The term institutional has been done away with in terms of the building regulations and changed to a care facility building to highlight the more inclusive nature and the modern language, a sensitivity in terms of our built environment. The opportunity has also been taken to look critically at our storage and industrial uses and to subdivide those uses through the building regulations themselves into normal and high hazard facilities, to give specific definitions and specific categorizations of these building typologies. And these are reflected in the technical guidance document. They are principally located now in the building regulations themselves. In support of that, as part of the amendment of Article 13, and Article 13, one of the key enabling provisions of the second schedule to the building regulations, those parts, those key functional requirements of health and safety. There are a number of subtle modifications in relation again to industrial and storage uses, that where a building use migrates from normal to high hazard, it is quantified as a material change of use under the building regulations. And the relevant articles or the relevant parts do apply to those works from the onset of the amendment to the building regulations kicking off next year. Coming to the meat of the building regulations, the parts and components that are of most relevance to our technical guidance and our minimum standards of health and safety, the second schedule to the building regulations, those functional requirements or statements that are expected to be achieved in respect of every building design to which the building regulations relate. There has been an update to key functional requirements of fire safety in the state. Notably, Part B1 has been updated, means of escape in case of fire has been changed to means of alert and escape in case of fire, that there's a regulatory requirement set out in the building regulations, that there is a means of warning in case of fire, and that is quantified throughout every building, irrespective of the approach used. If it is not a prima facie technical guidance approach, if it is an alternative approach, that legal requirement still applies. There's been an update to regulation or Part B4 of the second schedule, external fire spread. We have seen a number of large and horrific incidents worldwide in respect of fire spreading on the facade of buildings. Ireland has responded to that in a number of ways through the report of the Fire Safety Task Force in 2018 and through the revision of Technical Guidance Document B, in that there's now a regulatory requirement to inhibit the spread of fire on a face of a building disproportionate to the height in use, and for which technical provisions are given in Technical Guidance Document B. B5 is being updated to further align the provisions of guidance in respect of the Building Control Act. And there is a new provision added to Part B of the second schedule, the provision of information. This is a critical addition to the, I suppose, family and suite of fire safety. It represents a passing of information, a passing of the baton, if you will, at a particular point in time of construction, the completion of works, that at that time of completion, that sufficient information in a clear and concise manner is handed over from those who are designing and installing commissioning systems to those who are expected and required to use and maintain them at the time of completion of the work. So it is a point in time. It does provide that handshake, if you will, from the Building Control Act and the Part B provisions to enable buildings to be operated under other legislation, such as the Fire Services Act or the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. Its development was cognizant of other provisions that do already apply in the building regulations and technical guidance. So we have the requirement for a provision of information under Part J and Part L of the second schedule, and we have technical provisions in Technical Guidance Document J and Technical Guidance Document L for the operation, maintenance and use of systems. Fire safety being a critical aspect of health and safety in the built environment with critical systems does deserve and require those similar provisions, and they are now to be introduced as part of the amendments. To give an overview of the document structure as it was versus how it is going to be, or how it is published through TGDB 2024, this is a graphical representation, best approximation of the structure of TGDB 2006 reprint 2020. It's divided into 5 key sections, and for 3 of those key sections, means of escape in case of fire, Section 1, Section 3, compartmentation, Section 5, access and facilities for the fire services, there is a reliance on a suite of documents, cited documents within the TGD itself, that provides principal guidance for the design and configuration and layout of buildings. For example, for buildings containing flats, the current technical guidance document relies on provisions of BS 5588 Part 1, plus other parts of Technical Guidance Document B. The application of those sections of those documents are dependent on the intent set out in the Technical Guidance Document, and it applies across the board. So for the larger and more complex the building, the more of these documents apply. As they get taller, the likes of the essential characteristics for the design of firefighting shafts is brought to bear in Section 5. As they get more complex, the provision of atria in buildings, the provisions are drawn on from 5588 Part 7. TGDB has existed in the States since 1991. These documents, they were long-standing and well-established, but in the interim, for the time of the development of technical guidance document B, particularly 2006, to the redevelopment, we're painfully aware that all of these documents have been withdrawn and replaced. And in many cases, the replacement has subsequently been withdrawn and replaced. We are facing into a time of rapid change and advancement and modification in construction technology and modern methods of construction, in interpretations of how our buildings are to be designed and used. For this and for many reasons, for clarity, for one of the principal design considerations of the redevelopment of the technical guidance document, clarity and consistency of approach, a harmonious technical language, a single understanding of application of the proper provisions of technical guidance. The vast majority of what we can term as principal design provisions have been incorporated directly into the technical guidance document. That, for example, for the design of flats, there's a reliance on TGDB 2024, that all of the necessary provisions for the design of those buildings are incorporated directly into the technical guidance document, as they are for the provision of ventilation systems, for firefighting shafts, for the design of schools, for the design of atria. It is all in one document, one harmonious language. And we break these characteristics of interpretation of varieties of application of different documents. There has been an expansion and modification of many of the provisions of the technical guidance document. The scope has been updated in TGDB. The technical guidance document, at its very fundamental principles, holds with that of all of the technical guidance documents that they are designed around the application towards simple and non-complex buildings. Buildings are and can be incredibly complex. They can be complex in terms of internal configuration, in terms of use, and in terms of height. For this reason, technical guidance document does maintain that application to simple non-complex buildings, but does have a limiting factor in terms of overall height. That for care facility buildings, previously termed institutional, above 30 metres, the TGDB will no longer have effect, and for all other buildings above 60 metres. It's important to point out that above these key thresholds, the building regulations, the functional requirements still apply, but the method of design compliance and conformity does change, and for which alternative approaches may be appropriate. And Michael Lyons will be speaking on alternative approaches later on today. In terms of this, the provisions for alternative approaches given in the technical guidance document, they have been simplified to clarify the standing of the guidance itself in terms of the building regulations, to clarify the standing of other approaches that the technical guidance under the provisions of SI 497 of 1997, the building regulations, that the technical guidance are those prima facie approaches to compliance. While the alternative approaches provisions have been substantially reduced within the technical guidance document, a complementary initiative to clarify the standing of alternative approaches and provide information on their application in the state has been provided in conjunction with the publication of the technical guidance document. We're cognizant of the difficulties of use and application of building regulations to existing buildings. Again, the TGD does follow the normal position of guidance with respect to existing buildings. That direct application of all of the approaches may not be possible or may not be achievable in an existing building, but we do recognise, or did recognise in the development of the TGD, that existing buildings do cause difficulty in design compliance and conformity. For that reason, an entire new section has been designed into the technical guidance document to provide clarity on approaches to existing buildings, and we'll come to that. For maintenance and commissioning, the technical guidance document does recognise that there's a normal level of maintenance in buildings, but expects that systems are commissioned having regard to their end intended use before the operation of the building, again in keeping with design intent in other guidance documents, particularly TGDL. There's a new subsection, provision of information 09, which provides the prima facie guidance to achieving part B12 to the second schedule of the building regulations of how to provide that information, to provide that understanding that is clear information that's provided in a comprehensible format that is relevant to the specific system provided in the building. And I'm very much looking forward to the presentation by Colin Flynn later on the application of part B12. Finally, our purpose groups, long-standing and well-established with little modification in terms of the technical guidance document. There has been subtle changes to the table for purpose groups. First and foremost, the term day centre has been brought into the fore in the technical guidance document. This term has existed since 1991. It has been clearly defined in the building regulations, but again, in terms of clarity, it's important to bring forward the specific provisions in the purpose group to ensure that the appropriate application of fire safety precautions in buildings for the building uses. There are subtle subclassifications on the table for purpose groups. So, for example, for purpose group A, care facilities, there's a subclassification, purpose group A1, hospitals. Means of escape provisions are not included in the technical guidance document for hospital buildings. And purpose group 2A2, all other care facility buildings, where these this subclassification, if you will, has been incorporated throughout the text of the technical guidance document to give direct application to the two purpose groups and specific subgroups. So where there are specific clauses for day centres where children are accommodated on the premises, purpose group 5B2, there are specific clauses for schools under purpose group 5A. And so it allows a greater finesse and clarity in the technical guidance document. There's been a holistic application to the technical guidance document in terms of its content and provisions. It doesn't operate by itself. We don't build a Part B building and a separate Part A building and a separate Part M building. We build one contiguous building at the same time, even though we have separate, I suppose, if you call them approval processes through the building control regulations, particularly the fire safety certificate and disability access certificate. But we do build this, these are the one building, satisfying all of the parts of the second schedule that are relevant at the same time, and with that keen understanding that no one part can contravene another part of the second schedule as set out under SI 497. So there has been an alignment of provision within the technical guidance document. The method of measurement of doorways for Part B and Part M is the exact same method of measurement. So we're not measuring doorways in two separate distinct ways. We measure doorways the same way under TGDB. Our door widths have been aligned in terms of minimum door widths for escape to align with that for access and use, that the 800mm requirement for Part M is the same as the 800mm requirement for Part B. And there's been a commensurate increase in capacities having regard to that. Lobby dimensions in TGDM were slightly larger than that of TGDB, where they lead on an accessible route. And similarly, now for lobbies leading to a refuge, the lobby dimensions are exactly the same as a Part M lobby dimension. So we design the lobbies the same way we design them once. There's been a clarification of the visual aperture through vision panels, drawing on the provisions of TGDM. So again, the same doors, might have a TGDM door or a TGDB door, they will all have the same performances. There's been a clarity and alignment between helical and spiral stairs, with that of TGDB and TGDK, and their application of helical and spiral stairs in public buildings as defined under TGDK. And a performance metric for slip resistance. TGDB, for its escape routes, does have a requirement that surfaces are not slippy, but didn't define how they are to be quantified as not slippy. TGDK had very good guidance, as did TGDM, on this characteristic. So pendulum test values have been given in technical guidance document B for slip resistance. It is also cognizant of other requirements, for example, sound requirements, that where we have a division between a dwelling and any other part of a building that's not a dwelling or other dwellings under TGDE, there are robust sound performance requirements given, and technical guidance document B is considerate of that in its provisions to ensure that the sound performances are maintained or are not going to be contravened by technical guidance document B guidance. Briefly, to move through some of the changes within the technical guidance document for design of horizontal escape, now move to section 1.4. It does apply to all building uses, with the exception of dwelling units and common areas of flats, for which a new subsection has been created, 1.6, shopping centres under the new 1.7, and small premises provisions under the new 1.8. It's important to note that there are two key building typologies that are outside the scope of means of escape in case of fire under section 1, that is hospitals and sports grounds. Hospitals, for their design, we've referred to HTML 502, and for sports grounds, either Department of Education and Skills publication, Fire Safety and Sports Grounds, or the Green Guide. We've expanded the guidance with respect of stored exits in industrial storage and office buildings to use compartmentation, compartment walls, and they can be classified as stored exits in keeping with current guidance. And for single escape routes, there has been a maintenance of the single escape route characteristics for up to 20 persons for residential care facility buildings. For a day centre, creche, preschool or nursery, purpose group 5B1, there is a limitation of 20 persons in keeping with current guidance published by the National Directorate in Fire Emergency Management, and for schools and all other uses, an increase from 50 to 60. There's been an update to our provisions with respect to care facility buildings, additional guidance on door closing devices, both across corridor doors and bedroom doors, utilising magnetic hold open devices and free swing door closers. There's been a new provision introduced about, in respect of walls between bedrooms, that walls between bedrooms are required to be fire resisting unless a suppression system is provided through the care facility building. This provision doesn't apply between a bedroom and an ancillary accommodation or another part of the building. It's not a sleeping risk. They always have to be fire resisting. And a subtle clarification that it doesn't apply between a bedroom and its associated ensuite. That an ensuite is considered to be part of the bedroom. There's a limitation of number of bed spaces in a compartment to 10. However, that's not applicable in respect of a building with a suppression system. There's been modification to external escape routes, an upper threshold limitation for the use and application of external escape routes to a floor level of 11 metres. We've included guidance in terms of audience and spectator facilities where there are specifically designed tiered seating spaces in buildings. There's a clarification in terms of equity of use of buildings, that where there's availability of exits, it must be available to all who would use the space. So irrespective of ability or of how an individual gets to seating, if they have an impairment, they have an entitlement to equality of availability of exits. This again, the language for our audience and spectator facilities is aligned to that of technical guidance document M, where there are similar provisions for tiered seating. There are provisions incorporated in the technical guidance document for premises with a stage. Again, a clarification post the public consultation that these are buildings with a dedicated stage area, so specifically designed for theatrical performances with or without a proscenium wall. But for where they do have a stage, we do have specific provisions and clauses brought into the technical guidance document. There's also a new provisions for student accommodation units, specific units designed for the use and exclusive use of student accommodation, which draws on guidance that is standing and well established. For design for vertical escape pathways, for single escape routes for assembly and recreation or day centre buildings, purpose group 5B2, there's a upper threshold height of less than 5 metres or 5 or less before a second stairs is required. For a day centre building, which is predominantly used for children, its limitations are ground and upper storey, where there's less than 20 children accommodated on the upper level, in keeping with current guidance. Single escape routes are appropriate in buildings containing flats meeting the provisions of section 1.6, and for any other use, for any other purpose group that is not already mentioned, an upper threshold height of 11 metres, above which an alternate escape route is required, or basements deeper than 3 metres. Building on the guidance that was incorporated in Technical Guidance Document B 2006 reprint 2020, where new provisions were brought forward in respect of open plan flats, there has been a new section created in the Technical Guidance Document, section 1.6, which is specific and exclusive to the design of buildings containing flats, that the provisions in respect of escape within the unit, from escape on horizontal escape pathways, corridors and deck approach, and vertical escape pathways are incorporated explicitly in section 1.6 with additional provisions for ancillary accommodation to buildings containing flats. Again, in keeping with the new definitions introduced in 2020, the flats in the state have been subdivided into 2 key types: those that have a protected entrance hallway and those that do not have a protected entrance hallway, termed for the purpose of TGDB as an open plan flat. For PEH flats, the standing provisions of a travel distance within the corridor of 9 metres continue to apply. For open plan flats, the fire safety characteristics are dependent on a number of key design elements. The travel distance within the flat is at less than or greater than 9 metres. Is there an available alternative escape route, be it a window directly to the outside for a floor less than 4.5 metres, or a door for flats operating greater than this height? And is there a suppression system provided within the flat, whereby there's no requirement for an alternative escape route, and the maximum travel within the flat is less than 20 metres? There's been an expansion of the provisions with respect of masonettes, or a flat that has its habitable accommodation split over 2 or more stories within the technical guidance document. Divided into 2 key types: those that have a floor less than 4.5 metres above ground level. They can be treated as a dwelling and have similar provisions to that of Technical Guidance Document B 2017, for which new drawings should look very familiar to anyone involved in the design of houses. And for a floor greater than 4.5 metres above ground level. For any masonette above 4.5, or for where there's a floor above 4.5, the masonette deserves and should have a protected stairway enclosure. There's an additional clause given in the technical guidance document that where there's a change in height from the access point of the masonette to its upper floor of more than 7.5 metres, a suppression system should be provided throughout the unit. And again, these provisions are substantially similar to that of Technical Guidance Document B 2017. There are provisions given in the technical guidance document for vertical escape, that's for direct to stair designs, for open deck designs, change from balcony approach to reduce confusion between a private balcony and an open deck approach, and a lobby corridor approach building. There's been a clarification in respect of the minimum stair width design of building containing flats, a minimum width of 1 metre, but also designed for the expected and simultaneous evacuation that should be designed into all our buildings containing flats, following on from the policy position provided through the report of the Fire Safety Task Force in 2018. And there's guidance with respect to ancillary accommodation to buildings containing flats. Moving on to fire detection and alarm systems. In keeping with the functional requirement that has been introduced, a minimum provision of system for fire detection and alarm systems has been provided in a table in the technical guidance document that all purpose groups are now covered through the direct explicit provisions of the TGD. These do apply to works to which the building regulations relate. All of these systems, then their performance is to be achieved through the national standard IS 3218. Again, in keeping with the holistic approach to our guidance for our buildings, we do have a comprehensive suite of provisions for access and use of the built environment delivered through Technical Guidance Document M and the Disability Access Certificate application assessment and grant process provided through the local authorities. In equal measure to our enhancements of accessibility in the built environment, there is a reasonable expectation for equality of egress from buildings as well. And for that reason, there are substantial additional provisions given in the technical guidance document for the provision of refuges in buildings. The refuges can be provided in key locations in a building, in a stairway, in a lobby that has direct access to a stair, adjoining compartment, except in a building containing flats, in an external escape stairway, provided that the refuge can be accessed appropriately, or in the open air for a common deck. It's important to note there is the universally accepted symbol for accessibility provided as part of the refuge, but it's also important to note that not all disabilities are visual, that these refuges are designed for everyone who needs to use them, be they in a wheelchair, a cognitive or dexterity or mobility impairment, as a place to rest while evacuating a building, and this becomes particularly important in our taller, more complex buildings. Pause briefly on section 2 of the technical guidance documents, moving from means of escape in case of fire to the precautions of fire spread within rooms and spaces designed within buildings. At the moment, the technical guidance document refers to 2 test standards for internal linings and elements of construction, BS 476 and ISEN 13501 Part 1 are the European standards that is used extensively in our construction products regulations and declarations of performance. For new works, new buildings, and for new elements going into buildings, there has been an alignment to the European test methodology, to ISEN 13501 Part 1, for all materials going into buildings. That those classifications from A1 through to F, as might be familiar in a declaration of performance, are now expected for all construction products going into buildings. There is no reference for new buildings or works to BS 476 Part 6 or 7. The terms and definitions of non-combustible and limited combustibility have been moved to Section 7 of the technical guidance document, and so we'll come on to the design and intent and the application of Section 7 a little bit later on. There are surfaces excluded from these provisions, and there's an important clarification to the use and application of test methods. It is recognised that the European standards don't cover all construction materials that may be used and utilised in a building. To require them exclusively might work to exclude certain materials. However, there is an appropriate application of alternative test methods where the European standard would not be permissible, but where the equal performance in use and application can be proven. For the construction of compartment walls and floors under Section 3, what is commonly termed as the non-combustibility clause, the requirements of elements of structure to achieve a certain reaction to fire classification has moved from 10 to 11 metres. Keen to point out that this is a provision of this technical guidance document, not of the building regulations themselves. For buildings above 15 metres, there is a requirement that where a compartment floor meets an external wall, that certain precautions are taken to inhibit fire spread, bypassing the robust compartmentation that's provided within the building by means of either a suppression system or a fire resisting zone of 900 mm high, a projection of 0.5 metre or a setback of 0.5 metre. There are precautions given in the technical guidance document for the junction of compartment walls with external walls to improve fire performance and flanking fire spreading from one compartment to another. There was a provision in Technical Guidance Document B 2006 for the provision of fire doors in separating walls, or walls dividing one building from another, capable of being used for evacuation. That is being removed from the Technical Guidance Document B 2024 for new works, but there are again provisions given in Section 7 for existing situations. Under the special provisions of Technical Guidance Document B, we've maintained provisions for car parks in buildings and included substantial additional content in respect of the design of atria, flats to care facility buildings, other residential buildings, offices, and other non-residential buildings, for which extensive provisions that are in keeping with current guidance and diagrammatic solutions are given for the design of atria within buildings. I mentioned as part of the regulatory change to the functional requirements, there was a new regulation under Part B4 to inhibit the fire spread on the face of the building. This is the guidance to give effect to this functional requirement is provided under Section 4.3 of the Technical Guidance Documents, the restriction of external fire spread on external walls. A key threshold height for buildings is 15 metres, above which the entire external wall build-up, particularly for sleeping risk buildings, has to achieve a Class A2, S3, D2 reaction to fire classification, with the exception of appropriate excluded elements, such as membranes, laminated glass, thermal bridging materials. There's an acceptance and acknowledgement of full-scale testing, that BS 8414 test can be utilised in place of this requirement. However, it is the tested system and certified as such that can be provided on walls. There's also an overarching requirement to fire safety in buildings, that irrespective of the height of the building, designers should be cognizant and aware of materials provided in buildings to ensure that they would not contribute to fire spread over the face of a building in a manner to affect the safety of the occupants. Similar to our elements of structure, internal linings, the reaction to fire classification for external walls and for roofs is to the European test method. So again, a simplification of that test language, that where we expect to see materials to have a declaration of performance, it is those declarations of performance that can provide the proof of proper materials. Again, in keeping with international practice, where there are elements fixed to an external wall, such as a balcony, solar shading, or other materials, there should also be an adherence to the reaction to fire classification to ensure that external elements do not contribute to fire spread from one floor to the next, again with a threshold height of 15 metres. So where an external wall is constructed robustly to inhibit fire spread, that this wouldn't be, that the performance wouldn't be reduced by external elements. For the key elements of our performance of space separation and restricting fire spread from one building to another, that a building on fire should not disproportionately impact a building on a neighbouring site. There's been a new provision included for walls within half a metre of the boundary, where there are limitations on openings in the external wall, maintaining the provisions for between half a metre and a metre, and for external walls greater than a metre, the normal reaction or the normal external fire spread calculations can be used and applied. Moving on to section 5 and some of the changes to access and facilities for the fire service provisions. There's been an introduction to the requirement for, or the measure for, dry risers in sleeping risk buildings and shopping centres with a topmost floor height greater than 11 metres but less than 20 metres. For any building above 20 metres, the normal precautions of a firefighting shaft, as designated in technical guidance document B, that is the stairs, the lift and the lobby incorporated in a 2-hour wrap, to be provided in buildings. Similarly, for basements that have a depth of less than 10 metres but of more than 2 floors, more than 900 metres squared, also should have, under the technical guidance, a fixed dry riser or dry falling main located in a protected stairway. And the same precautions for basements deeper than 10 metres requiring a firefighting shaft have been provided, and for which new diagrams have been provided in the technical guidance document to provide visual clarity to the measures. There are provisions given in the technical guidance document for the electrical isolation of key systems, for the full isolation of premises, for high voltage discharge lighting, as is found in the current technical guidance document, and for photovoltaic panels, all relying and working with the electrotechnical standards IS 10101 published by the National Standards Authority of Ireland. There is a whole new subsection brought into the technical guidance document for smoke control systems. This section incorporates and brings together all of the relevant provisions relating to smoke control measures in buildings, that is the defined movement of smoke in a predefined and determined manner. It does bring together those provisions that might have been found in an array of documents, and highlights the need for assessment where there are multiple systems installed in one building to ensure that one system does not work contrary to another. The section has been designed in a deliberate manner. Subsection 6.1, the general provisions. Sections 6.2 through to 6.5 are the building specific characteristics moving from the most common to, I don't want to say least common, but less common scenarios. We do expect most buildings above of 2 or more stories to have a protected stairway. So section 6.2 comes up first in the subsection 6.2 comes up first in the section to give guidance on protected stairways. All buildings above 20 metres require a firefighting shaft. Therefore, it's under section 6.3. Some buildings have an atria, some have a basement, 6.4 and 6.5. The following 5 subsections are use-specific provisions. Flats under subsection 6.6, industrial and storage buildings, car parks, assembly and recreation buildings specific to ventilation of stages, and finally shopping centres under subsection 6.10. Under the general provisions of section 6.1, there is guidance given in respect of wall-mounted vents, with additional precautions given in the technical guidance document where a wall-mounted vent is provided on a wall that is near to or on a boundary to ensure that the vent can operate for the lifetime of the building. For the design and operation of mechanical vents, drawing on the harmonized European standards, 12101, and for natural vent systems. There's a particular clause in subsection 6.2 that all stairways designed to the technical guidance document to be provided with an AOV with a clear effective area of 1 square metre. Moving on to section 7, introduced in keeping and to support government policy with respect of our underused and underutilised built environment to support the regeneration and revitalisation of our towns and cities. There is a measured approach to the application of section 7, again drawing on guidance that has been in place for quite some time in other technical guidance to good effect. As a first pass and a first approach, it is intended that sections 1 to 6 should be utilised where possible in the redesign of existing buildings, where there are those key clear provisions and precautions given in those initial sections to be applied where possible. Where there are particular difficulties in application, be it combustibility of a stairway or stairway widths or provision of lobbies, combustibility of floor build-ups, there are prescriptive provisions given in section 7 that can be directly applied in a prescriptive manner for the use and reuse of existing buildings. It is also recognised that these by themselves may not be sufficient in terms of the design and reuse of existing buildings. Existing buildings, they are quite vernacular, they can have their own individual characteristics. Therefore, there has been an expansion of the application of compensating measures to all parts, to all sections of the technical guidance document with the proviso that the base understanding and obligations of fire safety are still to be achieved in respect of existing buildings. The development of the section does represent a consolidation and a clarification of all relevant provisions relating to existing buildings into one key seamless section. In doing so, it brings these provisions that were sometimes subtle and hidden to the fore in key sections. Section 7 has been designed to mirror that of the first 6 sections. So 7.1 is means of escape, 7.2 is internal fire spread linings. It's designed to provide that handshake and that clarity back and forth between sections 1 to 6 and section 7. We did mention for new buildings and new works, ISEN 13501 Part 1 is to be applied for reaction to fire classification. However, this does not extend to existing buildings where the existing fabric of the building is appropriate and would meet equivalent performances. If there are good materials in a building, be it a floor build-up, be it a lining, that would meet those fire safety requirements. There is no need under section 7 to remove those good, appropriate elements. So the 476 has been retained for existing elements in existing buildings. Again, aware of the long-standing nature of technical guidance document B 2006 and its foregoing additions and provisions, and of the changes incorporated in sections 1 through to 6 of the technical guidance document, there are key additional provisions in section 7, where provisions and measures were appropriate under the current guidance, they can continue to be. So, for example, while the minimum doorway width has been increased to 800 millimetres for 60 persons in section 1, a 750 millimetre door width at 50 persons flow is appropriate under section 7. If it is there, it can be used and retained in place and there's no need to increase widths. For lobbies to offices, there are specific provisions where the lobbies don't need to be provided. As for lobbies to flats, to support and incentivise the reuse of existing buildings with a topmost floor count of less than 4, topmost floor height being removed. For stairways to flats have been reduced in proportion to the number of occupants using it, and there are additional provisions given for masonettes access directly from the outside of the building, as can happen in many of our urban towns and cities, for escape to an enclosed garden, and the appropriate application for external escape stairways at any height of an existing building, but this is limited to existing structures. There's been an expansion of the guidance that can be used and relied upon for timber floors in existing buildings. Again, timber build-ups are not prohibited at buildings of any height where they are existing. use of BR 187 or BR 28, which does give very good guidance, prescriptive information on how to meet fire resistance requirements for timber floors. The provisions with respect of compartment floors in existing buildings and compartment walls above 11 metres have been retained. As has been what's termed as diagram 17 or diagram 22, that is the closeout of openings by window framing and above ground drainage systems. They were common approaches used in Technical Guidance Document B 2006 and its foregoing editions. And again, if that system is in place, there's no need to take it out owing to its exclusion from section 3. It remains in section 7 for existing buildings. And for doors and separation walls, again removed from section 3 where they are in place, and if there's no viable alternative to their use and application, they can continue to be used for means of escape. Finally, in terms of the 8 principal sections to the technical guidance document, there is a new section provided for the provision of sprinkler systems in buildings. First and foremost, for buildings containing flats and student accommodation units that have a topmost floor height above 15 metres, a sprinkler system is required throughout the part of the building. For residential care facilities with more than 2 stories, there's a ground one first, where there's a sleeping risk on an upper level, there's also a requirement for a suppression system recognising the design and use of the building, the escape methodologies, the progressive horizontal evacuation, and the need to defend in place. We've maintained the provisions for shopping centres, separated stages as are currently applied, and clarified the standing of buildings with a topmost floor height, non-residential building above 30 metres, requiring a sprinkler system. There's been subtle modifications to the appendices to Appendix A for fire resistance classification to ISEN 13501 Part 1, to Appendix B, fire doors, for the provision of the mandatory safety signage, for identification of the fire door and its performance on the door to be fixed in place, and for glazing, performance of uninsulated glazing on fire doors. There's a modification to Appendix D for high hazard storage buildings, that any storage building that has a racking with a topmost height above 7 metres to be considered as high risk, and the commensurate fires precautions set out in the various sections of the technical guidance document to be applied. In keeping with that process and a keen understanding that there is clarity provided to our technical guidance documents to all of these, what can be perceived as a confusing or myriad of provisions for fire safety, a new appendix, Appendix H, has been created in the technical guidance document that summarises, if you will, the different measures that might apply at different heights having regard to different uses. Moving from the single-storey building, the 2-storey buildings that less than between 5 and 11, above 11, above 20, 11, 15, 20, 30, and above 60 metres. And with them, the heights moving across the top and particular characteristics, provision of stairways, provision of suppression systems, provision of compartmentation provided on the vertical rows. When does all this take effect? The Technical Guidance Document B was published, and the associated building regulations were published by the Minister on 26 March 2024, with an implementation of the 1st of May 2025, so a 13 months time frame to understand and appreciate and begin to apply the provisions. For any works that start before that effective date, TGDB 2006 continues to apply with no end date. For any works that start after the 1st of May 2025, there has to be due consideration for projects that are at a substantially advanced stage. If the technical guidance document was to come into effect immediately, there would be significant disruption to construction. And this is in keeping with all of the implementations of technical guidance changes. So for works that start after the 1st of May, where there is a planning application lodged, or a Part 8 notice published, or a decision by Bord Pleanála with respect to a strategic housing development, or a fire safety certificate granted before the 30th of April, so before the implementation date, and where the works start after, they can continue to operate under the current guidance, provided that the works are substantially complete by the 30th of April 2028, substantially complete, defined under the building regulations. We do expect over this timeframe that the use and application of B06 would reduce and the use and uptake of B2024 would increase, with full implementation sometime on or after April 2028. These provisions are very much specific to the building regulations. They relate to the building regs only. They are not transposed directly into the control regulations. The control regulations are there to control the applicable building regulations. Finally, on the complementary initiatives, it was clearly recognised as part of the redevelopment process of the technical guidance document that there was a lot done through the technical guidance document, and it provides a substantial foundation for moving forward. There is also always need for continuous examination of fire safety in the built environment. First and foremost, there was an information note on alternative approaches to demonstrate compliance with the building regulations published in tandem with the technical guidance document to clarify the standing of Article 7.3, the use and application of alternative approaches, to highlight the need for care and consideration. Where one technical guidance document is not utilised, it can have an impact on others, to ensure that all 12 parts, are achieved in the one design. The department has engaged with Construct Innovate, the National Construction Technology Centre, to further examine key issues relating to building regulation compliance and conformity in the built environment. Just 3 of the key topics being examined, as recently announced by the Minister: fire safety in building regulation compliance and conformity in existing buildings, building regulation compliance requirements in universal design buildings, and standardised construction details for particular modern methods of construction. The department also established a fire safety research group composed of representatives from Building Standards, the National Director for Fire and Emergency Management, and fire authorities to examine ongoing issues and to carry out research on a variety of topics, including international benchmarking, means of escape and smoke control in flats, car parks, etc., for which we have already gone to tender on the first of a number of pilot studies. In conclusion, the overarching objectives of the development of the technical guidance document includes the provision of clarity, a consistency of approach to our technical language, to flexibility and simplicity in its application, to align the technical guidance to national policy, be it equality of access to the national policies on evacuation and alert in buildings, to support the reuse of existing buildings, as has been prescribed through many schemes, through the likes of the publication of Bringing Back Homes, to enhance the provisions of safety for all through the measures set out in Technical Guidance Document B, to align the Technical Guidance Document with the ongoing changes in building regulations. In the timeframe between the publication of B06 and B2024, every single technical guidance document, A through to M, has been updated. So we do consistently look at these requirements of alignment. To modernise the technical guidance document and to provide a strong foundation for moving forwards into the future in terms of fire safety, that the science never stops and the examination doesn't end. So we'll continue to, as always, keep the documents under examination. Thank you for your time this morning.